I've always been an outlier. So I like to encourage people to be outliers as well because you can. I was a teen mom. I got pregnant when I was 15, but it was something that really laid the foundation for who I am today, what I am, what I do, and how I encourage other people. I realized that other people, other mothers especially, needed what I could offer to other young women, especially teen moms. And so I decided at that point that I wanted to tell my story. I knew nothing about writing a book, nothing about publishing a book, but I figured it out. And that has really been the key to everything and every bit of success I've had in my life.
I actually wanted to start off with how we first met because I just remember that we were in a session and the woman presenter had said something like books don't make any money. And I just remember from there, you were like, I made a bunch of money with my book. And she said something else, and you were like, no. And then I built this platform. And so after that, I was like, okay, I have to talk to her because that really resonated with me because that is the perception a lot of times. You publish a book, you can't make money with it, it doesn't go anywhere. So just talking to you and seeing everything you've been able to build from that point on just was really inspiring me
Yeah.
personally. So wanted to talk about first your first book, your memoir, and really a bit of your story. What inspired you to write that to begin with?
Okay, yeah, sure. And I'm glad, look, glad you reminded me of that. I'm like, yeah, that is how we started talking.
Yes.
Um, I'm really grateful for my journey, and I'll kind of start by saying that even with that statement, it's I've always been that person that never felt like everything just falls in a bucket and you can make some blanket statement about anything. Some things are generally true, but I don't like blanket statements like that because they're always outliers and and I've always been an outlier. So and then I like to encourage people to be outliers as well because you can. So my journey really began, or my professional journey in this sense really began when I did publish my memoir, and that's where is it? That book, look, that one. You can kind of see it's a little bit
Yes.
blurry, but I was a teen mom. I got pregnant when I was 15, as a result of a first forced sexual encounter, which was of course traumatic and hard, but it was something that really laid the foundation for who I am today, what I am, what I do, and how I encourage other people. I graduated from high school, still the top of my class with honors. I got a full scholarship to college. I went to college and I graduated from college with honors as well. I was Miss University in Memphis and did all the things that teen moms don't do, right? I guess I left that part out. I had my child. I had my child and but I was successful in spite of being a teen mom. And people would always ask me, how did I do it? Because I had a child and he was with me, sometimes in class and at events and different things that I was doing throughout high school and college. And at the time, my answer was how to answer to the question, how do I do it? Was I don't have time to think about it. All I have time to do is do it because I was also working, doing an internship and just a lot. But fast forward to me into my career, I had worked for the Memphis Grizzlies NBA basketball team. He was there with me all the time too. Then I went to Service Master and I was working there. And then I started working at FedEx in advertising. And that was my first job where I kind of worked normal hours, 40 hours a week. The other jobs I worked a lot. And also, that was the time when my son was a teenager and probably the most challenging time in my life with my son, as a Black male without a father figure and really some of the trauma of knowing how he was conceived. And so it was a very, very challenging time in my life, and I personally could not reach him. And so I um, was seeking help from other people, from counselors, from men. But it was also at that time that I realized that other people, other mothers especially, needed what I could offer to other young women, especially teen moms. And so I said, you know what? This is oh, and one other thing, I was going through a divorce at that time. And so writing has always been therapeutic for me. And so I decided at that point that I wanted to tell my story, whether I published it or not. I wanted to write to help me deal with everything that I was dealing with at the time. But then I also realized that I could actually help other people, especially teen moms, to see that they could be successful. They could overcome the challenge of being a teen parent. They could graduate from high school. They could pursue post-secondary, and just how to do it. And so, like I said, I was finally working a 40-hour-a-week job. So I actually had some time, and I was done with grad school at that point. And so that led me to writing. Look, I'm like, it's all turned around because of the camera, but to publishing my memoir, I wanted to answer the question, how did I do it? And in that book, I was very transparent about how I grew up. Not in not I mean really in poverty, or maybe at least lower middle class. Very, very challenged. I talked about self-esteem issues that led me to being in a situation where I was assaulted. But how I dealt with all those challenges even once I became a mom, and how I was able to be successful. But that's how the book came to be. And I knew nothing about writing a book, nothing about publishing a book, but I figured it out. And that has really been the key to everything, and every bit of success I've had in my life is I know I can figure it out. And so that laid the foundation for the book getting published. And you can let me know if you want me to talk about how it started to make me money.
Yeah, so even that part of it, I was also a young mom moving through a lot of those same challenges, going to college and working and all those things while having a child. So again, just I remember when we talked, that voice is one that I could have used as a young mom, and just thinking about how much just being transparent and being open about your story can help those young people that were in that same place that we were all of those years ago. Was it easy for you to be openly vulnerable about all of these experiences that you had gone to up to that point, or was that a challenge for you in being able to share that story with the world?
Yeah. So it was, once I started writing, it was easy for me to write. It felt good because I never been to counseling, never really even talked to anybody about how I felt in all of those challenges that I had gone through. So writing the book felt good. I cried throughout, but it still felt good because I probably needed to cry, long before. So it felt very good. It felt therapeutic to write, to be vulnerable, writing it on, getting it on the computer. Right. That's just me and the computer at that point. But once I published it, once I decided to publish it, I still remember, and it was 2010 when I published it. So amazing that it's been over 15 years. Um, I still remember though, just waiting for the first person to read it and tell me what they thought. And literally, I felt like what I was doing was standing on a stage with a huge audience, and I was naked, just totally exposed. And when the first person clapped, it was like, okay, it's okay. And so that's how I felt about the book. It was out. I was totally exposed, and I felt like I needed to be. It was a reason for me to be, but I was scared. But when the first review came in, or the first person who read the book and said this was good and oh, this helped me, I could breathe. And I was like, oh, okay, okay, you like it. So now I can talk about it. And it made it actually even easier for me to deal with all the things I've been crying about as I was writing the book. And I cried about a lot of things. So not just the assault, not just becoming a teen parent, but all the self-esteem issues, being a stepchild, and how that made me feel, going through relationship issues, and my son hurt, all those things. I was able to see purpose in it. And so, no, it was not easy to be vulnerable. But once I was, and it was out there, and people let me know that I was not being vulnerable for no reason, that it was actually helping people, it became easier and easier and easier.
So you launch this book into the world, and then you start getting these claps. And so when do you start to see that, okay, this isn't just something that I've put out here, but this is something that is becoming something more?
Yeah, almost immediately. It's pretty amazing because I loved my job. I was working in advertising at FedEx, and that was like, okay, people who work at FedEx typically it's like, okay, you'll retire there because you could have several different careers. So that was my plan. Um, but then I started getting asked to come and speak in classrooms and speak in churches because the book was getting around. So I have a marketing background. All my career has been in marketing, and so I was marketing the book. I did PR, set up, press releases, and I was on a local media, even some national media, even international media. I was on CBN, and I was on CNN Headline News, and I was on 700 Club. So I was getting out there. The book was getting out there. And so people started asking me to come to speak in classrooms, at schools, in churches. And by nature, I'm really shy. Sometimes people have a hard time believing that, but it's true until I'm very, very passionate about something. And so then I'm still shy, but I'm like, no, it's important for me to say what I need to say. And so when people started asking me to speak in classes, I was excited to do it. Plus, I was like, okay, I want to promote this book. I want to sell this book. And I want people to read it. I want people to know about it. So I got to get out of my comfort zone and get out there and do this. And so people started asking me. I started going to classrooms on my lunch break or after work at FedEx, and people would line up to talk to me afterwards. Students, I was brought in to talk to students, but then teachers and principals and everybody was lining up to talk to me afterwards. And one, giving me my applause, but more importantly, telling me that it awoke something in them, that it made them think about their own challenges differently, that it gave them hope and inspiration. This is, and after doing that for a little over a year, I was like, this is more valuable than anything I could ever do in my job that I love, in this career that I love. This is life changing. This is impacting people's lives. And so I ended up doing that for 2.5 years, and then I got the opportunity. Well, I put in for the opportunity to take the buyout that FedEx was offering. They were offering a buyout, and it's like, okay, this is my opportunity to go and be a full-time speaker, because in that process, I learned you could get paid to speak, and I learned about all of that. And it's like, okay, now it's time. So I put in for the buyout because it seemed like if you wanted it, you could get it. They were trying to eliminate a lot of positions. I didn't get the buyout, but I ended up leaving anyway. And I felt like my heart had shown me my purpose, the reason why I had gone through a lot of tough things in my life, that I was supposed to use it in this way. And so in 20 June 5th, 2013 was my last day in corporate America.
And so for 13 years, you've just been building from there, which is amazing to think about. Like, a lot of businesses, a lot of ventures don't last nearly that long. So just thinking about the fact that you were able to set that foundation and take that leap and are now where you are now is amazing.
It's a journey, and I definitely appreciate that. And I'm like, I would not dare tell anybody it's been easy. Oh yeah, it's been great. I've been so awesome. No, ma'am, it has been a journey, and we talked about that when we met. I'm an entrepreneur. I actually never even dreamt of being an entrepreneur. I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I love working in corporate. I love my career, all the jobs that I've had. I only had 3 career jobs, but working for the NBA, and then worked at Service Masters, market manager, and then FedEx. I loved what I did. Never wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then, like I said, I feel like I found my calling, my purpose. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so now I need to figure out this entrepreneur thing. And I also, at the same time, I started a nonprofit. So I started an LLC and a 501(c)(3) at the same time, and learned how to run both of them back in 2012 and 2011 and 2012 is when I started the businesses. And so it's been a journey of learning, and exploring and failing and messing up and experimenting and winning and losing and for the last 13 years, but it's been fully worth it. I will say this, that it was before I left corporate that I came up with So What, the whole platform, the whole business, the name of the business. And that was when I was going to speak in schools. that I was staying busy. I was staying really busy speaking in schools. I was like, "Well, what is this?" And I wasn't charging anything at the time, but I said, I feel like there's a business behind this, and what could it be? I got when I was working at FedEx, I had, and I don't know if you remember Oprah's favorite
Hmm.
things on her show. You get a car, you get a car, you get a car.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, um, FedEx ships those items. So when the studio audience wins all these gifts and prizes, FedEx is the shipper. And I was over that deal on the marketing side. And so I had to go to Chicago to her studio to Harpo Studios to work on all of that. And I still remember when I got to Harpo Studios, I saw Harpo on the side of the building, and everybody knows, most of us know that Harpo is her name spelled backwards. And I had already written a book at this time, and I remember thinking about how I thought that was awesome, how her name was incorporated into her business. And so I got back home and I remember waking up one morning and I said, so what? So what? For me, it meant, because I've been that person all my life. It's just like, tell me I can't do something, or tell me why, or that I'm disqualified, or tell me, I'm like, okay, well, so what? I'm a teen mom. So what? I'm a single mom. So what? I don't have a lot of money. So what? This, so what? I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to do it. And then, like I said, the SO is Summer Owens, is personal to me. The foundation of everything I'm doing is the book that I wrote about my life as a teen mom. So I wanted my name subtly included because it's so personal to me. But at the same time, I wanted to be a strong declaration that anybody could say, because it's not about me, it's about them and taking control of their own lives and your own, challenges and choices to be successful, and just saying, so what, to whatever happens. And so that's where so what came from. And it's just, I'm very grateful for all the things that now have come from so what.
It was like a divine download of just like,
Yep.
waking up and coming up with that.
It
That's
really
that's
was.
awesome.
It really, really was. I mean, I sat up and I was like, so what? So what? Oh, that's the name of my, it just kept ringing in my head. I'm like, what does that even mean? I was like, that's it. And I'll even say this for somebody who's watching. I shared that with some people, some friends who I respect and love. And most of them said, well, that's cool, but it doesn't really sound like the name of a business because that doesn't really say what you do. And I received what they said and I proceeded with so what anyway. And it's been the greatest decision because it resonates with people and they get it and they know who I am, what I do, and what it means. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
you have to take feedback. Take feedback as it's important, but also take it with a grain of salt against your own gut and your own instinct.
Yeah. Like when you get that message so strongly, like sometimes it's like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing outside of everybody else's opinion about what
Yep,
I'm supposed to be doing.
absolutely.
So you also were able to go into curriculum development with So What? So I want to hear a little bit about that because that's really not a path that you hear about often for authors to pursue. So how did that really come about?
I'm a very creative person. I do think I am. But so many of my ideas have not just me being creative. It's because people ask for it. And so when I was speaking in schools, and I really feel really, really blessed because the book was getting around schools. I wasn't promoting to schools. I just sent out those press releases out in the media. And so schools started asking me to come. But then I had educators, especially English teachers and professional school counselors, asking me if I had a curriculum to go with the book because students were reading the book in class. And I was amazed by that. They were telling me students were reading the class and like they were saying, what is this book my student won't put down? Like they were reading when they weren't supposed to be reading, and they were bringing the book to class. And they asked if they had a curriculum. I said, not yet. I said, give me just a minute. And so I started doing my research on curriculum and curriculum development because that's not my background. My background is business. I have a BBA and a MBA. and I've always worked in business, specifically in marketing. So not education. I'm educated, but I don't teach education, even though I have taught at the University of Memphis as a adjunct professor, taught the curriculum. So I could talk about that a little bit more too, but I started doing my research, and then I actually hired a curriculum developer to work with me, and we worked hand in hand, and created the So What Literacy, Life Skills, and Career Education curriculum. It's actual physical workbooks. It's those workbooks. Again, I'm pointing those workbooks back there, and they're in different versions based on the educators who reached out to me. So there's a fifth grade version, a middle school version, a high school version, a young parent version, and there's a first generation college student version. And that's, again, based on the educators who reached out to me, the people who were reading the book, which I thought was amazing, from fifth grade all the way to college. And even the parents. I have a two-gen approach because there's a version that's for the parent. And I think it's because the book follows my journey from being a little girl into being an adult woman with a career. There's just a lot of relatability for a lot of different people. So that's how the curriculum was developed. I thought about and I was a mom at the same time, remember, and I thought about what I would want my own child to get from reading this story. And I was also a mentor at the Adolescent Parenting Program, which is school for teen moms here. I've been a mentor at that point at least 6 or 7 years. And so I thought about what would I want these young moms to get. And so that's what I created. It talks about everything, and it follows the book. So it just follows the order of the book, self-esteem and self-awareness and bullying, all the way through relationships, teen pregnancy and STDs, finance, budgets, because I talk in the book about buying my first car, buying my first house, savings and investing, and uh, all the way to what else? So health and finance and fitness and just everything, relationships and as a teenager, relationships as an adult, and being a single mom, all those, anything and everything almost that you can imagine a young person would experience. And dealing with trauma. That's another key element of the book. And so that's how the curriculum was created. It's in the third version now because as more and more schools use it, I'm learning how to make it stronger, how to make it better. And so it's just gotten stronger and better. There's an online component to it where I have videos to the students and to the educator who's teaching it. That was one piece of feedback that I got was the students wanted to see me more. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
And so I have videos to them, and it's just been a really, really powerful thing. But that also goes to what we said in the very beginning. That's where the money really came with me writing that book. So initially there was money too because schools were buying it in bulk and some churches were buying it in bulk. Which was great, but the bigger money came once I created the curriculum to go with the book. So now it's not just a book, it's a tool and it's an education tool. And so that's how I've been able to work with school districts and in individual classes, individual schools, but even districts to to get the curriculum implemented and also to do some professional development for staff.
So just to talk a little bit about if someone were interested in leveraging their book in this direction. I know that for you it came from not necessarily you looking to go on that path, but you being creative and outside people seeing something important that resonated and pulling you in that direction. But having gone through that and having been where you are now and having the lessons and having learned what you've learned, if there were someone who were looking at what they have to say, okay, this looks like something that I might be interested in going in the direction of, what would be your advice to that person?
So, one, it totally depends on what your book is and what your book is about to determine if that really makes sense. But honestly, and this is a big cheat code, right? So back in 2010, I wrote the book 100% from my mind, right? I created the curriculum, the workbooks 100% from my mind. Today, what do people have? We have AI. And somebody could easily ask their favorite tool, whichever tool, this is my book that I've written. How could I create this to be a curriculum for whoever they want it to be for? So for schools, for specific, like for middle school, for high school, for whatever, K-12, however they want it to be, for professionals, for whoever the tool will tell you. The tool will tell you, and honestly, the tool will help you to create the curriculum. Life is just a lot different now than it was when I created it, and so there's help for that. And in terms of if that's the path that you want to take, and yeah, and it's just a whole lot easier than it's ever been. If that's what you want to do, but and it definitely has worked for me because I again, when I wrote the book, I didn't write it just because I'm like, I'm hurting and I want to just tell everybody my business. I'm only doing this because I wanted to help people. And so for me, it was, especially after school started asking me for curriculum, like, okay, this is a deeper, greater way for me to be able to use this book to help people. And I knew people were reading it and getting something out of it. But the curriculum for me helped me to direct even more what they could get out of it.
So just thinking about your mission to help people, you went back and published books related to advice from your grandmothers, which I think is amazing, and tapping back into that wisdom again to share from another generation to the new generation. So talk a little bit about what motivated you to do that.
Yeah, so I'll share that was a little bit of journey because that was the third book. So my after I published my memoir, one of my grandmothers, the one who really was instrumental in me being successful even as a teen mom, I moved in with her while I was pregnant and she helped me as a babysitter while I went to class back to 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, finishing school um in my first year of college. But after I published my memoir, she said, Summer, I reckon I ought to write a book. That's exactly what she said. And I said, okay, Grandma, I knew what that meant. And so we wrote a book. I sat down with her and talked to her, recorded her, and I talked to her. And I wrote a book about her journey. And that was powerful. That was the most special time it was just beautiful. I learned a lot about her, and it feels good creating that book with her. And I have two grandmas. I'm really, really blessed like that. I knew both of my grandmothers. I had both of them in my life. They were both fun and friendly. I had great relationships with them. So I said, I can't write a book with one and not the other. And so I wrote a book with the other one. And she actually wasn't as open as the first one. But she had written a lot of poetry throughout her life. And so I got her poems and um, told her story a lot and included a lot of her poems and created that book. So the first one's called Look Who Done Come Up the Slip. And that was a saying that my grandma always used to say. So everybody who knows her, and it's explained in the book, Look Who Done Come Up the Slip. And then the second one is called Hey Girl. And they both have subtitles, but Hey Girl was what my other grandmother used to say whenever I walk in the room. Hey girl, hey girl. And so hers is called Hey Girl. But I think it was 2018 and 2019 that I published those books. And then 2 years ago, I lost both of them 5 days apart. They passed away 5 days apart. They both transitioned, one 7 days, one 3 days, but overlapping. And I was there with both of them. They were in two cities. It was kind of back and forth between the two cities, hour apart, and they transitioned 5 days apart. But I said, okay, just like everything else in my life, if it's tough, if it's rough, if it's painful, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? There's got to be something positive to create from this. And that's where the book that you're talking about came from. It's called 100 lessons my centenarian grandmas taught me, 2 centuries of motherly wisdom and timeless advice on confidence, resilience, leadership, and life. And I'll break that down. So 100 lessons is because one of them was 102, and she had just turned 102 a couple weeks before she passed. And the other one was a couple of weeks away from turning 98. And so the exact average of their age was 100, which is
Wow.
amazing. Um,
Amazing.
and um, of course, it was the whole book is about the wisdom that I feel like I've gotten from them from writing those 2 books that I wrote with them, and just being around them. And the confidence, resilience, leadership, and life, those are the topics that I speak about. That's what So What is wrapped around: confidence, resilience, leadership, and life. And so I have 25 lessons on each, that I feel like I've gleaned from my grandmothers. And so that's the last special book that I've written in honor of my grandmas.
That's just amazing to think about, like all of those years of just life and wisdom and all those things they were able to pour into you. I talked about I lost my grandmother last year at 96, and thinking about those women with so much strength that came before us and maybe didn't get a chance to be able to tell their stories a lot of times in the same way. So just being able to do that for both of your grandmothers is
It's
just,
special.
yes, it's amazing, that their voices are able to live on well beyond all the time that they had here. So,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
take it for granted. I said I feel you were blessed in the same way to have so many years with your grandmother. I had so many years with 2, because I published the book. The other meaningful thing that I did was I published the book on my birthday. So it was my 45th birthday. Yeah, on my birthday. And all that was fast too, because one passed on March 29th, the other on April 3rd. Funerals the next couple of weekends. I had a big awards program the next weekend. So What Awards and Scholarship Soiree, which is a big fundraiser that I have for the nonprofit that I started. That's where I announced the book. I showed the book cover. Book wasn't written yet. Hadn't been written yet. But I announced it. I showed the book cover. Um, I did all that, and I announced the scholarship that I created in their honor too. And then May 22nd was my birthday, and that's when I launched I released the book.
So, how did you write the book so fast? Because I know that's a question that people have that have been working on the book for years. Like, how did you really get focused on writing that book and
I did
publishing it?
that, and I'm honest about it. I use AI tools for that. I um I had written books already from with both of them. I wrote a lot. I wrote a whole lot. Because I like to write. I'm a good writer. I did not rely on AI to write the book, but to help me collect the ideas and put the thoughts together. And so that helped a lot. I have an assistant. I have a virtual assistant, um, who helped me to format it and put the lessons out there. So a lot of tools that I didn't have when I when I wrote my first book, or even the books with my grandmothers. It just got a lot easier. I used Upwork to design my cover, had somebody design the cover, all these things I had going on kind of at the same time. um, and so that's how I did it. That's how I did it.
Yeah, I usually tell people because people will ask me, how do you feel about using AI? And my thing is that once you know the process and you know the structure, you know how to get there. I think a lot of times when people just kind of try to start there without any knowledge, it ends up being a lot harder to get through the process. So I think sometimes it's like knowing the structure, knowing the process, knowing how to get to the end can be helpful in,
Absolutely. I think
whatever tools you use.
also, like, I still wanted it to be me, my thoughts, my feelings, my words. And so, like you said, knowing the structure, knowing the process, and really honestly, also knowing how to best use the tools, or knowing how to write first, knowing how to, how to articulate my own thoughts first before I even try to use a tool. I think that's very important, because otherwise, you know how it goes. It's easy to tell that this isn't um original thought. And so,
Yeah.
that was important for me. But that is how I was able to write it quickly, is that this is what I wanted to say. This is how I wanted to say it. And I just used tools to help me do it.
So you have a birthday coming up soon then, because we're
Yeah.
in May right now. So I know that in the last year that you have dealt with your own battle as far as breast cancer, and you have been very open again in sharing that story and documenting your story on YouTube, and I've watched most of it, and again just very inspiring there. What motivated you to be so open through that journey, because that happened so quickly after we actually met, and what that was like to find out and go through over the last almost year now.
Yeah, so I have to laugh. It's not really funny, but I have to laugh because like all the things, I get a lot of challenges. Um, and it's a lot of challenges I don't get because I know it's a lot of people who have a lot more challenges, right? But I think one thing that I'm grateful for from me is that whenever, and that's so what, I think it's just because I trained my mind with so what a long time ago now, that there's not a single thing that can happen in my life that this isn't the first filter for me. And so when yeah, it was in July, and I guess we met in June maybe.
Hmm.
So it was in July, and I had just returned from a trip with students because from my nonprofit, I took students to a leadership camp in San Jose, and I had to have a biopsy before I went. But that wasn't unusual. I've had biopsies before. Women if you A lot of women are like me and have dense breast tissue and have to have an ultrasound every time they have a mammogram, and sometimes they feel lumps, and I've had cysts, and I've dealt with all those things, so I wasn't worried because I've been through this before, and many women go through this, so
Me,
yeah.
same. When you were talking about it, I have the same issue every time I have to go back, and I'm never really worried
Concerned.
about it,
Yep.
because it's
Hmm.
every time. So,
Yep. So it was the same with me. And so this particular time, I remember I do. And my biggest concern was because I had to have that biopsy that time. I was like, oh, I got to go to the airport and I can't carry my backpack. So that was the biggest concern. But it was when we got back from that trip, I got the call and they said cancer cells were found. And I'm very grateful because I didn't freak out. I really didn't. I didn't get scared. I just said, okay, well, so what? So now what? Those are the little words right here. So now what? What's the next steps? What are we going to do? And that's how I embrace everything. So I really don't think there's anything that can come into my life that I'm not going to have that mindset that keeps me calm. It immediately keeps me calm and focused on the solution. And so then we started the journey. So the first step was a consultation. And I knew, I don't know, it was weird because I actually started the documentation with that biopsy because I did a video where I said I just had this biopsy, we're getting ready to go on the trip. But I definitely didn't know that was gonna be, and I've never done one about breast exams or anything like that. I've never done one. I guess that was some weird instinct that I had that it was going to be able to be used to be something helpful too. But once I did get diagnosed, the I had I learned from this journey of sharing is helping other people and can actually save somebody else's life. And so I already knew I'm a woman, and this issue that I have, meaning the dense breast tissue, is very common, and women should know this, and this can actually help somebody. And so I said, even if it helps one person, which was my mindset when I published my first book, even if it helps one person, it's worth it. It's worth it. And now I've sold, I don't know, over 10,000 copies of just that first book. So I know it's helped a lot of people. I have testimonials from from people, on Amazon just that I don't even know. I have testimonials from people that I've met, and all the things that validate that when I stood on that stage naked, it wasn't so bad. That people were like, okay, I thank you for doing this. And so me being completely vulnerable and just sharing without trying to make people think everything is okay. I got it all together. That's what helps people. And so this was just another thing. I'm like, cancer is scary. Cancer is very scary. So I'm like, okay, if I can share my journey and share that I wasn't afraid. And there are lots of reasons why I wasn't afraid. But one of them was because they found it at stage 0. And they found it at stage 0 because I was on top of my test. I was on top of the mammograms. I was on top. I did everything that I was supposed to do so that it could be found early. And, and what I've learned through this, and I've always been that person. I've never been a person who thought about not getting an exam. But there are people who don't. And so I said, okay, I know this can help people, this can change people's lives. And then also I knew more and more women would get diagnosed. So there's a preventative side or somewhat preventative side, or at least early detection side. But then there's whatever the process is, like it would have been helpful for me to have watched the series that I've created to be like, okay, well, what's next? And what was her experience like with radiation? What was her experience like with surgery? 'Cause that's what mine was. And also to know everybody's experience with cancer is different. Different parts of your body, even the same parts of your body, even the same diagnosis, the experience can be completely different. And so I wanted to share what mine was, and it's already been helpful. I had a few people reach out to me to tell me they got diagnosed with the same as me in situ. And I said, I can talk to you. I'm happy to talk to you, but I have videos for the whole process from start to finish. Um, just watch those at your convenience and we can talk. But they can see even me being calm throughout the journey and making friends at radiation. It's just like, no, it can be okay. It is a scary thing, but it can be okay. But that is how I look at everything. That's me becoming a teen mom, being a rape survivor, being a single mom, raising my son with the challenges that we had, even grieving my grandmas. It's like, okay, you can get through. I believe we can get through anything. Not that it's easy, but you can. And not only that, it can be something really good and positive for someone else, and so that's just kind of how I live my life.
So you came through that. When were you cancer free?
December 5th. December 5th is when I rang the bell, and that was when I was officially done with my treatment.
So you now have been through so much with so much resilience, going from being a teen mom and going through all of these different steps to overcoming breast cancer. You have this so what platform where you're able to share that with young people and with everybody, that type of resilience and how to come through those all of those different challenges. What do you feel like is next for you from here?
So I had a goal, and I shared this with you. So my birthday is significant to me beyond it being my birthday, but that was the day that I was assaulted and I got pregnant, and on my 15th birthday. And so for many birthdays after that were really hard. And I ended up in my 20s taking control of that and deciding to create new memories on my birthday. And so a lot of birthdays I'd like to travel and go out of the country and just create new memories. So on my birthday, so I'm not sad on my birthday, even though I love my child and what came from the situation, still obviously a tough situation. And so that was also why I published my grandmother's birthday, released it. That was why I released the book about my grandmothers on my birthday a couple years ago. So our goal was to create another book, and this one's called something around So What's Your Way to Success? Um, Success and Significance, about turning pain into purpose. And I'm still gonna write that book. But I have dealt with a lot in this last month, even that I've actually been working on that book for a few years. And it's a process. Everybody who's watching this is gonna relate to that. it's a process. So I've been working on it for a few years and I got this bright idea. I want to release it on my birthday. But I had a big awards program, like I said, at the beginning of this month, and there was a lot going on with that those last few months leading up to that. I had several speaking engagements. I've been traveling and some illnesses in my family that have delayed me doing that. So I don't think, unless like I get some huge burst of just locking it in, I don't think that's going to happen by my birthday. However, you asked what's next. The book is still next. The book is still coming. It just may not be on May 22nd. And that's going to be a powerful book because it's about so what and how so what came to existence. Some of what I've already shared with you is going to be in that book. Um, I still have the So What Foundation, and through the So What Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, we have a So What Ambassador program. So we have youth focused here in Memphis, in the city of Memphis, that we train to be ambassadors within the city. So we teach them about tools and resources in the city. So free mental health counseling and job opportunities, all kinds of things that we teach them about or expose them to. And their job is to take that back into their homes, into their families, and be an ambassador for those programs. But then we also give them amazing exposure opportunities like in July, we're taking our ambassadors to a leadership camp in Santa Barbara, California. We were in San Jose, California at a leadership camp last year when we came back. Same day we got back was the day I got my breast cancer diagnosis. So we have the ambassador program. We have two fundraisers for that program, the Love Yourself event, which is an event focused on self-love and empowerment. It's a beautiful event. And then we have the So What Awards and Scholarships Soiree, where our ambassadors get scholarships and we give out memorial scholarships. One I created to honor my grandmothers, and we have a few others. So we give out those, honor incredible people in the community. We just finished that. That was May 2nd. Those events I want to continue to grow and grow and grow with the foundation side. I'm a speaker, continuing to speak more, to travel. I would say more. Um, I don't know that I necessarily want to speak more, but just have more impact, and more opportunities that align with my goals and my focus. Because when I first started speaking, I want to speak everywhere, but now I don't want to speak everywhere. I want to speak with more intention, and to be honest, higher fees because life has taught me even more, and I'm even more valuable. And so I'm grateful for that. So even more of that foundation, I do coaching. I have a community. It's called the Soul Success Sisters community. It's a community for women. And it's about everything that I talk about: confidence, resilience, leadership in life, and creating success in spite of challenges. I have a podcast called the Success Stories Podcast. Continue to grow the podcast and share even more people's stories of resilience because I know my story helps people, but we all have powerful stories. We talked about your story. We all have stories that will help other people. So not everybody else is as open to sharing their stories or even have the platform to share their stories. And so that's part of what I want to do to continue to share more people's stories. So just continue to grow and evolve the nonprofit as well as my for-profit business so that they can help as many people as I possibly can.
So I feel like I could talk to you forever. But I do.
Like we did
But
at the conference.
yes, exactly, for days. But just in kind of wrapping up, thinking about someone who is where you were years ago and they're thinking that they have a story that they want to share and maybe they're on the fence or just trying to work through all of those thoughts and emotions and all of those things about really putting their story out into the world. If you could give them a piece of advice, what would you leave them with?
Um, and so it depends on who you are, what level of writer you are. But number one is like don't hesitate to do it, share. Um, One, I would say, some if it's your personal story, this is something I kind of learned the hard way. um, Pray about it because I'm a spiritual woman, right? So pray about it and pray about when you share it, how you share it, and the other characters in the story and how it will affect them. And so, and how you share your story in a way that it doesn't do harm. And if you know it's going to do harm, it could potentially do harm, because that, to me, that doesn't mean you don't share it, because there are some characters in my book that don't look good, that aren't portrayed in a positive light. But be aware, at least be aware of the possible outcomes that may not be exactly what you expect, but think about that as you write, or before you write, and as you write, take that into consideration. um and be prepared for what possible outcomes could be. But also, there are experts like you, um who can help, who can guide you in the process. So if it's you don't really know where to start, get help, talk to somebody who's done it before and can help you. And realize there are lots of tools out there that can support you, but no tool is more important than a person. And so use the tools, use the people. But but I am such a believer in sharing your story, and the power of sharing your story. And so, and if in your heart and your gut, you're supposed to do it, then yeah, do it. And like everything I say in my life, figure it out. You can figure out how to do it, but also everything in life is so much easier to figure out now too.
Well, thank you so much, Summer. I'm so glad we were able to do this. We've been talking about it for a while. I'm so grateful that you were able to come on here. I know that people watching this will really be able to benefit from everything that you shared. So thank you so
Well,
much for
I
talking
thank
to
you.
me.
Absolutely. I'm honored that you asked me to. Thank you again.